This is Michael J. with the opinion. Today we bring you Pierre Poliev. And Mr. Poliev just put out this video one day ago. He costs more than Trudeau. So this is what Mr. Poliev is stating. He costs more than Trudeau. So my question, or my suggestion to Pierre Poliev is, Pierre Poliev, you should act like a leader. Okay? So let's see. Is he acting like a leader? He costs more than Trudeau, is this statement here. He just says, ignore the hype and the image. Here are the numbers. Where are the numbers, sir? Where are the numbers? Where are the facts? Let's look at the comments. Contemptuous Carney. And then a whole bunch of, it might as well be tabloid gossip column. The Daily News. The Daily News. What's that American tabloid that has those newsstands right there as soon as you go to the supermarket? So the country of ours is almost completely destroyed. Right. Pierre Poliev is a constant source of truth. The question is, what truth? Whose truth? And where will this truth take us? We are in so much trouble if we continue down our path. He's not spending in Canada, so where's the win for Canadians? Okay, dokie. Carnage is a total disaster. Very helpful. Thank you for the info. Canada is having debt left and right. I wish mainstream media also report all Carney's spending. This is bad. You say it's bad? Is it really bad? Based on what? Let's have some facts here. Thank you, Mr. Poliev, for continuing the fight for freedom from this villainous grifting government. Holy moly, 3 months in, and it started just within the first week after Carney got elected. Not even set up his cabinet yet, and they were saying this. Praying you can win this seat and get back to the House. He lost his riding in Carleton of 20 years because his policies didn't resonate with the people. His policies were inappropriate for the country. But you have a certain faction that follow him blindly, and I call it Maple MAGA North. Very similar to MAGA in the South, United States. We see some parallels for sure. Math is hard for liberals. What kind of math? What kind of math are you using? I want to live in Pierre's Canada. I don't. And I'm not conservative, I'm not liberal, I'm not NDP. I want what is best for everybody. And it's not Pierre's Canada. Is it Carney's Canada? It's a start. Is it perfect? Far from it. NDP? Not even close. There's nice parts of everything, but we have to get rid of this pain and suffering. Cut, hurting people. We have to do things in a different way that creates growth and positivity in an uplifting and harmonious manner. And it can be done. Just change the way we do things. Facts, hurt, and deception and distraction is the culture. Thanks for honoring our intelligence. It's your beliefs. Your truth is only as strong as what you know. And if you limit what you know, then you're deriving truths that are a construct that may only serve you and a subset of the population, but not everybody. And this is where you've got to think differently. It's up to you. You can open your mind to think differently or not. Thank you, common sense. Right. So let's see what he's got to say here. What's Mr. Carney got to say? Or Mr. Pierre Poliev.
So the media is making a big deal out of Mark Carney's latest flip-flop on government spending. After running an entire election platform promising to spend billions more without any identified cuts or layoffs in the public service, he's now told his ministers to identify savings of 7.5% next year, 10% the year after that, and 15% by year 3. His office then leaked these letters with these instructions to the media, which has acted like these cuts are already complete, but not one penny in savings has actually been achieved so far. It's just promises. That said, it might seem...
No, Mr. Pierre Poliev, you're twisting it around already to your way of thinking. Is put forward in order to get some feedback to what each department thinks they can accomplish in savings, how they think they can accomplish those savings, in order to figure out what is conceivably possible without hurting people. So nothing is written in stone. It's to get feedback. And unless you get feedback, how are you going to know what to do? Do you just take a cudgel to everything and just say, I know better? No. You have to get feedback from the people that are in the trenches doing that type of work that can give you an educated response so that you can adjust accordingly.
Too early to judge whether he is going to keep these promises. However, Mr. Carney has been Prime Minister since March 14th, 2025. The fiscal year that started April 1st.
Hold on. There was an election. Until that election came to fruition and it was determined who would be Prime Minister of the country, and you were in the election also, Mr. Pierre Poliev, and you actually lost your seat. And the election culminated April 28, 2025. So let's be forthright and honest about everything. And prior to that, the government after Trudeau was prorogued. So you're just spewing more nonsense to rile your base, to create a warm, fuzzy feeling towards you that you're working for the people. And you're not working for the people. You're just working for yourself. And it's based on your actions and behaviors.
Of this year has been entirely under his watch. And he has introduced what are called the main estimates. That's the big spending bill that authorizes government to push money out the door. How does that bill compare to the one that the Trudeau introduced a year earlier? And how does the spending of Carney compare in numbers, not image, to his predecessor? Well, let's take a look. Trudeau's last spending bill had the government spending $449 billion per year. Now, under Carney, that spending bill is up to $487 billion a year. That is an 8% increase in just 1 year. 8% is double the combined rate of population growth and inflation. So the cost is vastly outstripping the need. And remember,
Hold on. Outstripping the need? Based on what? Based on your own personal opinion? Based on a position that you want to garner faithful followers for? How does it serve people? How is that debt spent? And does that debt actually work to invigorate the gross domestic product and change the way trade and commerce is throughout the nation, plus dealing with the affordability factor as well? So these are factors not even considered here by Mr. Poliev, because all he knows is to cut taxes, cut budgets, cut taxes, cut budgets, cut taxes. That's all he knows. And it's really as simple as that. Mr. Poliev is cut. And that's just not the way things will benefit the people.
this spending is stacked on top of the already bloated costs that Trudeau left behind. Now, Mr. Carney claims that he is going to spend less but invest more. In other words, he wants to categorize more government spending as an investment and therefore artificially lower what is actually counted as an expenditure, kind of cooking the books. So how is it that he defines spending versus
cooking the books? So you cook your books a different way. Everybody cooks their books a different way. You make these allegations, and that's all they are, is allegations, and you've been doing it from day one. Carbon tax, Trudeau. You took that carbon tax, axe the tax slogan and platitude to the 9th degree. The leader, Trudeau, had to resign, and you have to be careful what you wish for. And then again, you axe the tax, and any extra dollars that tax put into people's pockets within 3 months, less than 3 months, was eaten up by inflation. You got a problem with the United States right now. These tariffs are changing the way we have to do things permanently. And the quicker we learn that and get on with that, the better, instead of just getting caught up with this nonsense We're playing the blame game, and we got to cut. Fear. It's fear. Creates anxiety in the people, and the people respond autonomously on auto program. They don't even realize. They're causing harm to themselves, everybody else, and it's not good.
Is investment. Well, for example, he admits that bureaucracy and consultants would be in the spending category. So let's compare those items to the way they were under the previous Trudeau government. In the last year of Trudeau in power, bureaucratic spending, that's spending on public servants, was $59 billion. This year, under Carney's new spending bill, it's up to $62 billion, a 6% boost in 1 year. Again, the bureaucracy is growing at least 40% faster than the rate of population growth and inflation combined. In the last year...
Yeah, but how is it going to, in a comparative, and the only way you're going to be able to categorize that and track that is because it's going to be after it's spent and how it returns. It's a return on investment, ROI. How it's going to, so already you're knocking the return on investment before the investment has a chance to mature and provide a payback for the citizens. So you're getting ahead of yourself here, Mr. Pierre Poliev, and I just stated in a very concise manner. You're getting ahead of yourself. You're just creating fear. You're causing problems by creating fear because it creates anxiety in people, and when you have anxiety and fear, people make bad choices.
Trudeau spent $19 billion on consultants this year. Carney is spending $26 billion, a massive 37% increase in just 1 year. That $26 billion works out to $1,400 in extra costs per family for federal government consultants alone.
So what?
Now you know where your taxes are going. The big boost in spending does not even include...
No, you know where your taxes are going. But does it provide a return on investment? And that's the real question. And that's not the question you're broaching here.
Mr. Carney's big spending election promises, such as his new housing bureaucracy that will cost taxpayers nearly $3 billion per year. Since the election, he's piled on even more spending commitments. The biggest is to triple defense spending to $100.
Fear, and anxiety, and then defense spending. Well, you know, we have to worry about if Trump had his way, he'd invade Canada. He'd take us over. And we have to be very, very careful and align ourselves differently and walk carefully with this guy Trump. You know, the Pentagon has formulated plans to actually invade Panama and Greenland if Trump can get away with it without Congress's approval. Look what he did in Iran. He didn't get Congress's approval. He just did it, and look what's happened. Meanwhile, with Iran, he had a deal in 2018 that had been previously set up by Obama that was working, gave the international community a way to actually measure uranium use in Iran. He ripped it up. And what's he done since 2019? It's 2025. He's just bombed the crap out of people and ripped up an agreement, and he just wants another agreement. So he had one to begin with. Why do you think if you have a tariff agreement with this guy, he's going to honor any agreement unless it's a tariff agreement that's so egregious and detrimental to Canada? And why would Canada even consider that? Because that's all Trump's doing. It's my way or the highway. Very, very predatory. Guy doesn't understand cause and effect because he's hurting Americans every day, thinks nothing of it.
$50 billion. Now, let me be clear on this. There's no amount of money that will ever be enough for our military. We must boost defense spending to support our troops, secure our seas, sky, and soil, and protect our alliances. But let's be clear about one thing. The money must come from cutting elsewhere, not simply piling up debt. Furthermore,
why does it have to work that way? You've done that over the course of history, and it's not worked out. We're in a jackpot here right now. Things need to be done differently. And we're going to look at something different, a different way of looking at things, because we have to change the way we do things. If you keep applying what didn't work in the past or what worked in the past that created the problem now, and you think applying what didn't work in the past to now is going to solve what's been created by what was done in the past, it makes no sense. Okay, so here we're going to look at an economist. We're going to use the American example to give you a different insight, but the parallels there so you understand just basic economics done differently. Modern macroeconomic theory versus the old corporate way, the Friedman way of doing things.
One big, beautiful bill, and it includes the largest spending cut, $1.7 trillion.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
They are fighting over something on which they are both wrong. Every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their heads in shame. Government spending alone is not a problem. What government spends its money on is an issue. Musk is saying...
Did you understand that? Government spending is not the issue, but what they're spending it on is the issue. And that's what you have to understand. Tax cuts, you're just pissing money out the window. Out the door. And you've seen that. Doug Ford, his $200 check to everybody in Ontario creates $3 billion in extra costs that are non-recoverable. Help no one out. You know, $200 isn't going to change anybody's life. He'd be better doing the $3 billion. If you look at the Highway 407, the Harris government sold it for $3 billion. To balance their budget. Meanwhile, we created $30 billion in positive revenues over the course of a decade or so. So this is why you have to look at things differently.
I'm going to politically destroy the Republican Party. And on the other side, Trump is saying, I'm going to deport you, potentially, and sick Doge onto you and wipe out your finances. This is a huge war. And they are fighting over something on which they are both wrong. And what Musk's doing is channeling what he gets taught. If you read a conventional economics textbook or if you listen to an economist on YouTube, they'll tell you that Musk is right. And if you were taking this stuff seriously, if you think the economy is being driven bankrupt by government deficits, if that's how you're going to vote in the next election, watch this video, because you have to see how the banking system actually operates and therefore why all this stuff is a false fear. I've set up 5 tables that are going to enable you to see the financial system from the point of view of the banks, which is here, the firm sector, households, and the government. This is the way that banks operate. They do double entry bookkeeping. So I'm now going to put in some basic numbers here. These are just for illustration. You could actually put in the proper numbers for America. The banks must have positive equity, so I'll put that in first. Let's say they've got 10 there. And then let's say households have 60 and firms have 20, and I'll put 10 in the government account there. So that now balances the row, and that's now correct. And this is one of the 2 major elements of Ravel, that it makes sure that line balances to 0. If it doesn't balance to 0, you've made a mistake. So firms...
Let's be clear. He's made his own proprietary software that he's created called Ravel, so he can be able to track these things in the manner he's showing you here right now.
They're going to pay wages, and that is going to be a flow of wages dollars per year out of the accounts of firms and into the accounts of households. And that's going to be a flow of consumed dollars per year coming out of household accounts and going into firms' accounts. Now include the borrowing. So we're told firms borrow, so firms are going to have a flow of borrow dollars per year coming into their accounts, and that's going to be coming out of the accounts of the household sector. And of course, when you've borrowed money, you've got to pay interest. So firms pay interest, and they're going to pay it to the household sector. So that's going to be a flow of interest dollars per year coming out of the firm's account. That goes into the household accounts. What do the banks get out of this? Well, the only way you can show banks making any money here is if they charge a fee. So that's now going to be minus fee dollars per year coming out of household accounts, and that goes into the short-term equity of the banking sector. Then banks can then spend, and I'll have the banks just spending.
Okay, I want to make sure that you understand a very important thing right here and now. The 2008 financial crisis is a result of private sector lending out of control that created the crash. Government spending is totally different. And if you balance your budget with the government, what happens is the private lenders, the bankers, lend more money, which is a higher risk, and this is how you came to a crash in 2008. I want to make sure you fully understand that.
On the firm sector, so that's going to be minus spend, but let's now include the government as well. So you're going to have taxation, and that's going to be a flow of money going into the government account from the private sector, and just for simplicity I'm going to have only the household sector paying those taxes. Then you're going to have government spending, and I'm going to have the government now spending money on the firm sector, so it's going to be minus spend dollars per year and going into the firm sector. And now one of the rules that governments are required to obey, they spend more than they get back in taxation, then the government has to issue bonds. It means that they're going to get revenue from those bonds, which is going to be bonds dollars per year, goes into the bank account of the Treasury, and that is paid for by households. So that's going to be a flow of minus interest dollars per year coming out of government account, and that's going to go to the household's account. There are so many things which you can't understand unless you see the system in double entry terms. So if you're going to get involved in this debate, and that includes Elon Musk, model it properly, and then you'll see whether you have a problem or not. Now let's bring up the firms table and see the financial system from their point of view. When you click on this little wedge down here, it goes looking for liabilities that haven't yet been allocated. There's firms, so all the operations I've done for firms come across from there. I'm now going to add debt of firms as the liability of the firm sector, that the firms owe to households, so that line is balanced on that way. So consumption increases the amount of money in bank accounts. Spending by both the government and the banking sector increases the net worth of the firm sector, and paying wages reducing it. So I can bring all those across in one go. Now I need to look at the households, so bring up their table. And of course households are the asset of their bank accounts at the private bank. So if I click on households here, all those operations come across. But they also have the asset of the debt of firms. But what about bonds that households are buying? Well, that's another asset. So those bond sales now are going to have the net worth of the households. And I can just say to the program, balance all those items. And now we have just two elements to add, the central bank and the Treasury. Now, if I bring up table for the central bank, so the only thing I've offered there is reserves. And this is the Fed's net worth. And therefore, in this model, it starts off negative. And now, finally, we need to see the Treasury inside here. So now I've brought it in there. Liabilities, it owes debt to the household. Now we have the Treasury, so I can just tell Ravel very rapidly to bring all those operations across. And now you've got picture of the net worth of the Treasury, the central bank, the households, banks and firms. That's a complete model of loanable funds in terms of the cash flows. It's the opposite of what the textbook teaches, and you can see it simply by changing the structure to make it more realistic. So there is no crisis in this system. Musk is worrying about a phantom. What I haven't yet done is convert this into a simulation model. That's one of the other powers of Ravel. So I'm going to first of all copy all the stock variables which are there, and the one stock variable that's missing that matters here. I haven't got the debt of firms and the debt of government, so those are the stocks that I need to relate to the flows that are going through. So that's basic logic for the way in which flows happen in the system. Now I want to graph this and see what actually happens over time. So let's just take a copy of some vital elements there. We want to see what GDP is. I'm going to take a copy of GDP and attach that to a graph over here. And one thing which obviously matters, so I want to look at the levels of debt as a fraction of GDP here. So I'm going to take a copy of debt of firms and debt of the government sector and divide them both by GDP to get what the debt ratio is. So that's going to be, we have debt of firms divided by GDP and put through a percentage. And I have a percentage operator here, and the debt of firms divided by GDP is the debt ratio for firms. So I'll call this debt subscript F percent for firms, and then the same thing for the government. So take a copy of those bits there and divide government debt by GDP and work out that fraction. And this is now the debt of the government. Those debt levels there, let's now take a copy of them and graph them as well. Let's just start with no borrowing. So I just want a copy of the various borrowing parameters here. So we have the lend fraction by households, and we have the spending fraction by the government, and the taxation fraction by the government, which determines the other factors in the model. What we're mainly looking at is what happens if the government spends more than it gets back in taxation. So I'll make those the main ones up there. Now hit the run key. Let's just see if the simulation works okay. And yes, we're going to simulation of the system. And you see there's no debt because there's no borrowing going on at the moment. GDP settles down to a constant amount. What happens now if we have the government spending 1% of GDP more than it takes back in taxation? And what you get, as you can see, is an increasing level of the debt of the government sector. It's already hitting 12%, 17%. So what you're seeing here, that's 130%, 150%, rising exponentially. This is the catastrophe that Musk thinks is going to happen, which is going to cause a collapse of the...
And this is the way it's being modeled by Pierre Poliev, based on his beliefs and his truths that go back to prior to the Stephen Harper government, when he was part of that administration.
economy unless we stop the government spending more than it's...
And here's the other thing. This is how Pierre Poliev wanted to apply his way of thinking to the, if he was prime minister, which is the worst thing you can do in the situation we're in right now. But people are led to believe that. He's starting to continually create that brainwashing because all his supporters in government, here, etc., because he got extra seats, because of the mega influence down south, has creeped up to Canada, which is a very dangerous thing to have happen, but it is here nonetheless, and we've got to deal with it. But it creates a scope of thinking that is detrimental to where we really want to evolve to. And we want to evolve into a prosperous, safe, and good country going forward. And that's really where we want to go.
Takes back in taxation. So if we try to do that now, for example, after this much spending, there's still interest being paid. The debt is still rising. You've got to even go worse than that. You've got to reduce government spending and try to bring that fraction down. And it's terrifying, okay? It's a really, really scary problem. And it's a complete figment of the imagination of mainstream.
So what's the missing link? And you're going to see this coming up.
From economists, because this is not how banks operate. So I'm going to go to the household sector first of all, open their table, and then say, well, it's not true that the firms borrow from households. Firms borrow from banks. So we delete that as an asset household sector. So all you're left with is household consumption, taxation, and firms paying wages for the household sector. But now I've got to change some of the other elements of the system here. So let's bring up the banks table now. In the banks table, we now have to say, well, the debt of government and the debt of firms are actually assets of the banking sector. So create room for an extra asset here. Click on the down arrow and the debt of firms and the debt of government turns up. There's the debt of firms. There's the debt of... And now let's get rid of the idea that households pay an introduction fee. That doesn't happen there. But the interest payments, we still haven't equalised that. But I'll do one more thing before I bring in interest payments, and that is the government mainly banks at the central banks. Let's delete the operations there at the private banks and go across to the central banks table and then say, as well as the central bank having the liability of the reserves of the private banks, it also has the liability of the government's account. So bring that one across here, and now we have to say that all these transactions that were shown by loanable funds on the banks table actually happen at the central bank. So bonds are bought from reserves, interest by the government increases reserves, spending by the government increases reserves, and taxation reduces reserves. I need to change the balance of the equity here. That's the actual equity of the central bank. So having done that, I've now got to say the interest payments over here go to the banking sector. So bring out the banks table again, and all I can rapidly do that by saying just balance the equity over here. So now let's see what happens when we have the government spending more than it takes back in taxation. The same level, a 1% of GDP deficit. Hit the run key, and notice two things. First of all, GDP continues to rise, because what is going on when the government spends more than it takes back in taxation, it's putting money in people's private bank accounts, it's actually increasing saving, not reducing it. So you get an exponential increase in GDP coming out of this. You get rising debt, but rather than rising debt going up in such a way that there's going to be a crisis rising exponentially, notice it starts to taper. And in this particular case, government spending alone is not a problem. What government spends its money on is an issue. If he continues down this route, he's going to screw up humanity on this planet and never get to Mars.
I feel like many other truths.
So there you go. You have to get away from the way of thinking that the debt of government is not the issue. What is the issue is what it spends that money on. If you're given tax breaks, like Pierre Poliev wants to do in order to help stimulate the economy, but they actually don't, they just create more cash flow going out the door and not creating any return on investment, same as what Doug Ford did, $200 checks in Ontario, plus also, you got to understand under Trudeau with the NDP said, okay, let's do a GST break. Okay, that helped short term, but all it just did was create a deficit to the government where that money instead, if it was invested in an investment that created a return on investment that increased GDP going forward, it would have been better spent that way than giving a tax break. But people want to keep the voter happy, so they figure these tax breaks, and they've brainwashed the conservatives under Pierre Poliev, and all conservative governments have brainwashed that these tax breaks will create the relief that you're looking for. But it's been proven over time that corporations, there's no trickle-down effect with the tax breaks. And it just gets taken out by the private sector in ways and never filters down to the average guy. And that's what you have to understand. And that's where we're at. So I got an online event, international event going in about 15 minutes, so I've got to run. Questions, comments in the comments section. Love and peace to everybody. Take care, be good, and thanks for watching. Ciao for now.